Welcome pilots to this episode of the Jetworks build series, where I'll be showing you how I've put together the gorgeous F-18 Hornet. In this build I'll be taking full advantage of using all the 3D printed parts available on the site. These are printed in lightweight PLA other than the two rear elevator support. So once you have your foam cut and your glues and things that they're ready, it's time to go on with the first step in the build, which is the forward fuselage bottom and the fuselage sides, attaching bulkhead 1 as the first step. Now on the fuselage belly there's a very slight curve near the tail at the point end. So on the edge of the table, just a slight pull and just form a gentle curve on it. Bulkhead number 1, you can see there that there's a slight angle at the top. Just be mindful of how you put it on. As you'll see here, I actually put it on backwards. So quickly notice, turned it round. Fuselage side corner reinforcers. So I'm just putting it against the fuselage belly and just marking off the 6mm spacing as to where the fuselage sides are going to attach, so that when I glue the side supports on, they'll actually go on the inside of the line. Now there's a slight curve at on the corner reinforcers as well, and that slight curve matches the fuselage belly and it goes to the end, to the rear part just there. So again, just testing it, just tapping it against the table to see which end lifts. Offer it up to the foam, get the glue coating on both surfaces, allow it to dry, and then just gently tack it on, moving from the front to the back, marking it up against the lines and keep it in position. Once they're stuck, a wee bit additional glue on the inside of the support sides, support reinforcers. Again, just tapping it and seeing which end has a slight curve on it. Offer it up and then just slide it about just to make sure that there's a nice even coating of the glue. Once you're happy at that, just set that to the side. Moving on to the forward fuselage sides. So as you can see here, I've already trimmed the back, trimmed it with a blade, but here just pulling the sides across the table just to match up as close as we can to the fuselage belly, just so that there's no stress when you're gluing things, gluing the foam to the side and it doesn't try to pop off. So once you get it as close as possible, as close as you can that you're happy with, we'll attach it to the sides and then we'll move on to bulkhead number 2. So on the outside of the support reinforcers, just apply some glue, whatever it is that you use, and on the two chamfered edges at the tail, I've applied some glue there. So I've just offered it up to the fuselage and sliding it about to let the contact surfaces actually meet with the glue so they're both evenly coated. Allow it to air dry a touch. Once it's air dried, attach it to the fuselage and then it'll be stuck. Bulkhead number 2, just offer it up and see a wee test fit, see that you're happy with it, nothing needs trimmed. A wee spot of glue and then put it to the fuselage and allow it to cure. Now you can see here that I've just glued the corner pieces. I didn't actually glue the sides of the fuselage for whatever reason. Funny how you notice things when you go back and you look at it. So the next step is the magnet panel support pieces for the cockpit. The cockpit support pieces. So we've got the cockpit support sides and the magnet panel there as well. Just having a look to see that it's in the right orientation. Put a small amount of glue on one side, the mirrored side offer it up to the support sides, and then just let it air dry for a second or two. Next step is attaching the cockpit support panels. So once you're happy that the glue is cured on the magnet support pieces, both sides is the mirrored sides, apply a small amount of glue, and then as you can see there, I smudged it about just so there's a nice even thin coating all along the side, and then just gently push it in to the inside of the cockpit, and using the panel at the front just to make sure that there's a 6mm space in there, and at the back the bottom of the cockpit sides lines up with the bottom of bulkhead number 2. So again, just sliding about to make sure that it's both sides are even, lining up on the bottom of the bulkhead number 2, and also the 6mm spacing at the front. Once you're happy that that's cured, a wee bit of glue just on the contact surfaces, and then slide that in and allow it to set. So now that the bridge panel's in, we're going to move on to the bridge panel middle and the bridge panel top. So again, there's wee lines on the plans there where you should be sanding them back to, you know, a nice even angle. As you can see here, I'm using a blade, a nice sharp blade, and just be careful when you're using blades and cutting foam because you can quite easily slip. I'll do it this way so that when I'm adding the cockpit later, I can sand it down to the shape that I actually need, just for it to follow the contours. So a small amount of glue, again let it air dry, and then the bridge panel top, slide that on so there's a nice even contact on both sides, and I've just left it to cure on its own. So the cockpit magnet panels, I'm building the single canopy version here, and as you can see there's 3 parts to it. The small part, I think it's B, I need to relook at the plans. That just slots back in front of the bulkhead number 2, and then on the next piece there's a slight angle which actually goes towards the bottom of the fuselage. So just on the rear and the underneath, just slide that into place up against bulkhead number 2 and line it up with the cockpit sides. Then a small amount of glue in the magnet panel and slide that into place. Next step, very simple, the nose cone aligner. Small tab here, I'll make sure that when I'm putting it in that the glue is actually wet. I'm not allowing it to air dry because trying to slide it in can be quite difficult at times. And then here we have the 3D printed nose, fantastic shape, nice detail finish on it, and the seam I have running down the underside. So we test fit, offer up to the fuselage and the nose cone aligner. Quite happy with that. Small amount of Yoo-hoo, or more than I usually use, to be honest, especially when it comes to the nose. No doubt I'll end up bumping it and having to print another one. So again, offer it up, let it air dry so it becomes tacky, and then once it's you're happy that it's there, put it on a fuselage and then it's stuck. Next step is to sand the fuselage. So here we're just measuring back as per the plans as to where you're going to sand back to. Now the inside corner reinforcers, that's pretty much the length of it as to where it is you're going to sand back to. So before I sand, I'll get a nice sharp blade, again just be careful, and I'll trim away as much of the foam as possible so that when it comes to sanding, it's a bit of a quicker process. As you can see, there's a fair bit taken off it before we get to sanding, so I usually start with about 150 grade, using a piece of foam because I feel it's not as harsh and as abrasive as using wooden blocks, but each to their own. As you can see, after a wee bit of sanding, working from 150 up to about 240, we've got a nice shape and finish on it. Next step is the rear fuselage sides. Now, as I'm building the EDF, I've already trimmed away the front part where the intake's due to go, and I'm removing a couple of the holes at the front for the servo and at the rear for the reinforcers. As you can see, there's a thicker part which goes to the points to the front, so we just a wee test fit. Just fit it in, see it's nice and snug. Just apply a small amount of glue. I like it saying it's a nice fit there, so you don't need too much at all. Bit of a pressure squeeze in. Once both of them are in, wipe away any excess glue, and it looks pretty good. Removing the rear servo holes, and as you can see, yeah, it looks nice flush fits. So next step, again, as it's an EDF with 3D printed parts, I'm removing the front of the belly, the underside. So next step, fuselage sides and the belly, and attaching the 4 reinforcers. Now, at this point, following the guide, I've marked where the side panel is going to go on, obviously using the side reinforcers just for the 6mm spacing to show where the side panels are going to go, and then just pulling it across the table, trying to get as close to the shape of the bottom of the sides as I can, so that again it's not applying any pressure when you're actually gluing it. Small amount of glue along the sides, and then just offer it up so that both contact surfaces are met. Now there, as you can see, I actually forgot to try and form it before I offered it up, but I was quick enough to notice and managed to get it there. So once you allow it to air dry a touch, offer it up to the side and then stick it down, staying in the 6mm markings that we've already put on the fuselage. Now if I was doing this again, which I probably will, maybe the Super Hornet, do it as a pusher. At this point, what I would probably do, like with the fuselage front, the nose, I would probably put the corner reinforcers on first. However, going with the guide, this is the steps that we're doing. We'll put the sides on and then the corner reinforcers in. So once you've got the first 2 in, just push them into size, make sure there's a nice contact on both surfaces, and then on the next one, again, just a small amount of glue along the sides, rub it together so that there's a nice thin application, and then just offer it up to the fuselage belly, slide it into place, obviously giving it a wee bit of air time before you actually put it down. Next step is the EDF bulkheads. So here I've chose to use the QX model, as it's actually part of my Scrooge build. Usually I would go for the FMS brand, however we're going for a cheaper brand and I'm hoping it lasts longer than 2 or 3 flights. So there's all the electrics together with the EDF mount. Just obviously push out the insert, and this one, the 70mm, fits pretty good. So the forward bulkhead, I'm just test fitting it into the fuselage. The front fits fantastic, so just using a small amount of glue round about the fan housing. Get the back one, yeah, it looks fine. Bit of glue on both sides. Offer up the back, again that fits very well, no trimming required whatsoever. Twist it about and get it into the position, ready to install into the fuselage. So now that we've got it, a wee bit of glue just on the contact surfaces. Obviously the glue around the housing is still pretty wet at this point, so just slide it into the slots in the fuselage belly, make sure it matches up with the fuselage sides, and as the glue is still wet, I'm just twisting the housing to make sure that the wires are pointing up the top, ready to come out the top panel. In the rear, I'm just pushing a carbon fibre rod through just to make sure that it's all aligned. At this point, I'm using the elevators just to mark and get an idea of how much is actually needed to make the elevator control movements. The next part is the upper corner reinforcers and the exhaust bulkhead. See here we've got the 4 corner reinforcer strips. As you can see, there's a slight bend to them as well. So just offering it up, getting the shape and forming it to get as close to the shape of the fuselage side itself, just to be test fit. It will need a wee bit of trimming once you put it in, because the majority of the time, well, I certainly don't get it absolutely bang on. See, we're just forming it a wee bit with my fingers just to get the shapes, and again test fitting up just to see how it looks. Small amount of glue on the bulkheads itself, and then offer it up to the fuselage, give it a wee smudge about so it's just a thin application, because these parts will be getting shaped, cut and sanded, and we all know that Yoo-hoo can be quite rubbery, so as less on there the better. Once you're happy with it, just offer them up and make sure they're as flush as possible. Next step for the EDF build is the thrust tube and the exhaust bulkhead. As you can see there, I've already cut the elevator control arms, small amount of glue on the EDF bulkhead, and a small amount around the flange on the EDF thrust tube itself. Once you've got it into position, I've just turned it on its side so that I can make some small minor adjustments and slide the thrust tube and match it up as close to the EDF housing itself. The next step in the guide is lining up the fuselage and installing the EDF intake. So here we've got a small amount of glue around the flange on the EDF intake itself, the air intake, and around the contact surfaces. So just offer it up to the front bulkhead, line it up, make sure it's in place and that all contact surfaces are met around the side of the fuselage. At this point, we're taking the opportunity to add the exhaust bulkhead that we should have added earlier on in the build. Apply a small amount of glue on all the contact surfaces and around the thrust tube itself. Just giving it a wee squeeze, making sure all contact surfaces are met with the glue, and then just take it off and allow it to air dry a second or two. Once you give it the opportunity to air dry, just offer it back up to the fuselage and slide it into position. Now that we have the EDF intake secured, we'll align both fuselages together, the front and the back. So I've got the rear fuselage lined up on the table, using a line on the cutting mat and an additional piece of tape just so that I've got a reference guide. Apply some glue on the marked location on the fuselage belly and then slide the nose into position. Use a battery to weigh it down and keep it nice and flush. So the next step is the wing and installing the front strakes. So as always, get your wing plate, leave it flat on the table, and choose which side of the Depron you'd like to be facing up. So we're taping off here where we're about to add the carbon fibre reinforcement spar. Flip it over. I'm also going to do the elevators at the same point, as I'm mixing up epoxy anyway, so we're as well doing it all in one go. So again, just tape off the underside of the wing, flip it over, and then remove the excess foam. Now this low-tack masking tape that I'm using is new, it's a different one, it seems to be a bit more tacky than the last one. However, it's not to say it's certainly not a bad thing, it just takes a wee bit longer to remove the excess foam that we have. So once you've got that done, it's all prepared and you're ready to put in the wings, put in the spar, just mix up some epoxy. We've got some additional tape going on to the outside of the spar slot, just so that if there's any additional epoxy going in there, it doesn't spill over onto the wing, and you can get a better finish. So here, set of scales, just mixing up the epoxy just to make sure that we've got the right quantities, and we get a nice good bond. And this point I'm actually trying out some micro balloons for the first time. In true builder's fashion, just couped some in, mix it up, and it actually became quite thick. It was white. It was certainly a bit different, so I'll certainly be using a bit more of it in the future. And I think next time probably measuring out the quantities that it's supposed to go in. I'm not actually too sure of the ratio. So into the wing slot where you're due to put your carbon reinforcement spar in, and as we do, just tease it out to the edges just to make sure that there's a good contact all around the spar and the wing itself. If you miss this part, you will find that you'll get some gaps in your wing surface, which will require a bit of filler as well. So same with the elevators, however I'm just being careful just to leave a small space closest to the fuselage side, as we're going to be putting in the control horns there as well. So as you can see, we've got I think it was a 6mm carbon spar I put in here. The build guide will ask for the same carbon spar, and I think it's a fuselage that has the aluminium tube. However, I've chose to use carbon fibre rods or tubes in both sections. So again, just placing in the carbon fibre support spars, pushing it down, just make sure it's nice and flat, using a couple of batteries to weigh it down. Make sure it's flat and even on the build surface, and then some additional epoxy on the top. Just liberally spread it about. Again, just push it in, make sure it's nice and flat, and then with a scrap piece of foam, just spread across it to make sure there's a good even coat of the epoxy, and you're smoothing it off as much as possible, removing any of the excess. Once you've done that and you're happy, just remove away the excess tape at this point and allow the epoxy to set. So now that we're happy that the epoxy's set, I'm going to take the opportunity to add the 3D printed linkages as well for the ailerons. Here I'm just trimming a wee bevel, sharp blade, and using a 45-degree angle. Just cut. You can sand it, and I think you should really need to try that at some point. However, just sometimes I can't wait. So just lining up the linkages, putting them together, obviously making sure they fit pretty well, and just lining them up to where I think they should go on the wing plate. Using a pen, just marking around where I'm about to cut it, and then just with a sharp blade moving in and cutting out the pre-marked slots. So using a wee bit of tape just to hold the two surfaces together so that I don't end up with a squiggly line, and cutting out where I'm not supposed to be doing. So here I'm cutting possibly an extra millimetre, maybe so, wider, just so that I can gives me a little bit of play and moving them into position to make sure that they fit properly and line up just where they should. So mixing a wee bit of epoxy, again just into the holes where we've taped up on the other side, but just at the ends and not near the middle. Only takes a small amount because you certainly don't want too much in there, and then when you put in the control linkages, that actually squeezes epoxy out to the middle, where you're going to be looking for the movement. So just be careful at how much you apply in. Also, when you're doing this with the linkages, make sure one of them turns in the opposite direction. And what I mean is so that all the linkages are not pointing in the same way, the same direction, then it's possible that they could come loose. If you turn one of them to face the opposite direction, then it should hold them together fine. So we're just removing the tape and again allowing the epoxy to set, using a couple of batteries just to keep it nice and flat and flush. Once that's done, once it's given the right amount of time, in this case it's 20 minutes, just gently move away the low tack masking tape, or in this case the stickier than low tack masking tape, and just pull it away. When you're removing the tape, keep it as flat to the surface as possible. Don't pull it upwards, just pull it nice and flat against the control surface. As you can see here, they do move, so quite happy with that. There's a wee bit stiff. I will need to trim just a little bit of the foam, probably use a bit of sandpaper, but I'm really happy with how the linkages turn out. Nice and secure. So once you've got that done, the wing plate's ready with the ailerons cut into it. Just test fit against the fuselage. I'm quite happy with that. Looks pretty good. All looks level and flush. So here I'm just marking up the strakes as well. Strake 1, because I had to trim just a slight bit off the fuselage, I think due to when I was lining up the forward and rear fuselage pieces. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 millimeters. I actually pushed it too close to the rear fuselage, hence that's why I need to trim the strake. So once we've got the glue on the fuselage, we've inserted the wing plate. Same with the wing strakes, just a small amount of glue. Give it a chance to air dry so it's very, very tacky, and then just attach it to the wing. You'll see there is a slight curve in the strake. For some reason I've missed that there. What I mean by missing it is forming it on the table. So the next part is strake 2 and 3. Here I'm using 3M77 and some Yoo-hoo. What I've done is I've gave it a gentle form on the table just to try and get the same shape as the wing plate in strake 1, and then hitting the underside with some of the M77 spray so that as soon as I attach it up, it's pretty much stuck. And the same with strake number 3. Line it up as close to the fuselage as possible, nice and tight and firm, and press it into position. Next step is fuselage top support panel. So here at the end, where your exhaust mount is going to be, just attach your small support panel there. You'll see that there is a small space in front of it where I cut too much from the top piece. I actually used a wee bit of 3M 3mm Depron also on it, just to clear that hole. So before we go any further, I'm putting a piece of Velcro into it while I have the opportunity, because I remember on the Super Hornet the battery went quite far back. So here I'm putting that in just now, and then before we go any further with the top panel, just looking at the wiring, pushing it through and just making sure we can get the wiring into place before we go sticking the top down. As you can see, I've got the servo extension cables on. Now where the cables join together, because it's no longer going to be accessible as soon as we put this down, I actually use a wee bit of hot glue on the connectors just to make sure they're stuck and secure with each other and they're not going to loosen off. So just as we're ready to fit the fuselage top panel, just apply a small amount of glue along the sides, the contact surfaces, and at the front there I'm just marking with a pen where the outside of the top panel is going to be, so I can put some glue on the inside of the lines just to make sure that it meets pretty well and there's a good contact to glue there. So it's had a wee bit of air time to dry off. Pushed it down. As you can see, I've just put a wee bit of tape on the end there just to make sure it's held down. Through the ESC holes, pushing through the wires to get them to an accessible position before we go any further. Quite happy with that, and I taped them off just so that they were all together. And here I'm just in the process of hooking them up to understand which cable actually operates which control surface. Here the ESC, making sure the ESC is plugged into the right cables, cutting a wee bit extra relief on the top to get the cables down as neat and tidy as possible. So the next step is forward turtle deck bulkheads, the rear turtle deck bulkheads and the sides. So quite simple here, just a wee spot of glue, offer it up, slide it into position, and the same with the forward bulkhead. As you can see on the ESC here, I've added a cooling fin just as there's very little airflow going to be over this as it's underneath the turtle deck. So hopefully that'll just help it a wee bit. So the turtle deck sides, we have the reinforcer on the turtle deck side, offered them up, and I'm just marking again where I'm about to place some glue. So the turtle deck, to gently curve them, I've give them a wee bit of a form on the table. However, when the glue's down and it's had time to air dry, it's going to be pretty close to straight contact at the back there, so I'm not really worried about it. So as I say, a wee bit of air time there. Once both surfaces have had a wee application of glue, just make sure everything's levelled up, and then offer them up to the bulkheads at the front, as long as the front's in position. And then I just kind of eyeballed at the back there, pointing off to the exhaust manifolds just to get an idea of the lines that I want to go. Here I'm using the turtle deck top just as a reference to make sure it's lined up pretty good. Now there's a turtle deck support piece. I just trimmed up the sides slightly just so it's nice and easy fit. Apply a wee bit of glue. It was quite tricky, sometimes it would pop through, but once the glue was on there it was fine, and this gives a wee bit extra support at the top. Turtle deck top, just as before, apply some glue along the contact surfaces and give it a good 5 minutes of air time, because there's a couple of curves in this. We want it to be stuck pretty good when it goes down. Once it's happy with that, it's time to do the canopy. So a 3D printed one, as you can see, no surprise, Barry 3D printing. This using as a reference, I'm going to mark it out as to where there's any sanding needs done, and right at the back you will see a tiniest of gaps there, which is no problem. 3mm, 6mm piece of foam, just a wee square goes in there and that'll easily fill it up. And as you can see, once I've 3D printed the cockpit and got one of the clear canopies that are absolutely fantastic, once it's in there, any gaps is quite easily resolved when you put the build together. So at this point you can use the supplied formers to sand it and give it to the shape that you want. And I worked my way through to 600 grit sandpaper using Craig's method that you find, I think it's in the F-22 Raptor build, where adding some water to the filler and getting it to a milky creamy consistency, brushing it on or pasting it on with your fingers, and getting it to fill any of the pores that have been opened up due to sanding and getting it to the shape that you want. Step after that is applying 3D printed additions to the stabilizer for that scale look. I think they're fantastic. Again, printed in lightweight PLA. Just apply a small amount of glue, touch it up so that both contact surfaces are met, wipe away any excess, and again just pull it away and give it some air time so that when it goes on it's pretty much stuck. But I think it gives a really good finish and nice scale look to it. As you can see here, before I added the vertical stabilizers, I laid down the first coat of paint after sanding it. It's just to make it easier to get a good finish of paint, and I re-rubbed in the sandpaper before we start applying second coats. Next step is the intakes. Again, 3D printed. These look pretty awesome. As you can see here, we've just offering them up. We've put a wee bit of glue onto the contact surface, offer them up and giving it a wee push back and forward to allow the glue to come a bit more tacky. At this point I've just left them on there to just dry as and just allow the time that is needed to make sure it's stuck nice and firm. But it looks awesome. Yes, like I say, they can be done without the use of the 3D printed parts, but just for ease and scale look, I think it's great. At this point, I just noticed I have printed off the tail hook. Unfortunately, I've not managed to put it on as yet. So here we are, a completed build, and I'm sure you'll agree, just with a 3D printed canopy on the top, she looks absolutely stunning. Thanks for taking the time out to have a look at the video, guys. I hope that it's helped you in some way or other, even if it just gives you a brief understanding of how to put the build together and how quick and simple and easy it is. Thanks again, and as I say, pilots, I hope this was some use to you. Looking forward to seeing your other builds, and please stick around, check out Jetworks online for the superb models that Craig's designed for us all. I'm looking forward to seeing some of your fantastic builds and liveries, and good luck with your maidens, pilots.